basic freedoms that were surrendered in New Zealand and elsewhere, but notably in New Zealand, were something I guess you and I would never have expected to see in a democratic country. Do you think that those, have we now put those behind us, or is there a danger that some of those measures that were introduced, some of those intrusive measures, may be used in other circumstances or continue in some way?
Well, for the largest part, fortunately, we have left them behind, but it has given us a precedent. The precedent is actually that it shows politicians what you can do if the population lets you get away with it. So that was the most shocking thing, really, to see the compliance of the New Zealand people, to see how far New Zealand people are willing to go along with the government imposing quite draconian measures. I mean, the lockdowns we had here in New Zealand, they were probably much harsher than lockdowns, say, in European countries, probably on par with what happened in Victoria, Australia. But yes, it was quite shocking to see how compliant such a population can be. And it's something I would have never expected to see in a country like New Zealand, which is still in the tradition, of course, of British institutions, of the British style of democracy, of the rule of law. And suddenly you find yourself locked into your own home for 6 weeks and you're not legally allowed to venture more than 2 kilometers past your place of ordinary residence. So this kind of compliance really shocked me. And also the degree of conformity in public opinion, because there was very little in terms of questioning whether the measures taken were the right ones. People basically went along and they were willing even to tolerate some probably unlawful behavior by the elected officials.
Yeah, and part of that, I guess, is the media. The New Zealand media is pretty uniform, right? There's not a lot of diversity. And from the conversations like this I've done with you in the past and we've put online, I'm willing to bet that the majority of people who actually watch this interview will be in New Zealand. So they're looking to sources outside New Zealand to tell them about their own country. This is an incredible situation, isn't it?
It is. So you're right. Whenever we do interviews in Australia, I can see these interviews coming back to New Zealand, and then people say, well, actually, it would be nice if we could see this on New Zealand television or read interviews like that in our New Zealand newspapers. So yes, the New Zealand media are quite weak. They have for a long time been compliant, actually, with all of these measures, and they were not questioning them too much. I mean, that is a generalization. There are some good journalists still working in New Zealand, but you can basically count them on probably two hands. By and large, the New Zealand media is underfunded. So, for example, we don't have any international correspondents left. I think by my count, maybe 5 or so. And the newspapers are quite thin. We are reporting a lot on sports, on the weather, on human interest stories. But there is a lack of discussion and deep debate on the real issues that will determine the future of this country. So we've got a bit of a problem in our media. And therefore, I'm not surprised that whenever we cover New Zealand in depth, in overseas channels like yours, we will have a big audience in New Zealand because that's the kind of content that people cannot actually find in New Zealand itself.